Hello everyone, this is JPL, and today I'm joined with,
Matthew here.
and we are podcast name in brackets, yes, and today we'll be talking about those fun TV show intros that we would watch as kids, or maybe even now, that come in the beginning of TV shows.
Yeah, they're one of the most important ways a TV show can set the stage each
Yeah,
episode.
if your show does not have a good intro, it's it's something they don't think good about. It's a minus point for your show.
Yep. And if your show has a great intro, then people really pay attention to it.
And then there are shows that have no intro, and they're whatever. Um, but yeah, let's get going here. We have a long list of intros to talk about. There's just too many good intros out there, and there's really not much to say for each intro besides they're good. This one's got red in it slightly. Um, but yeah, let's start with our honorable mentions. Why don't you give us the time and stuff, Matthew?
Okay, yeah. So, our first honorable mention is a bit of a classic. I'm sure people have heard it quite a few times, and that is, of course, Veggie Tales. Um, this is an iconic theme song, especially if you are a kid in the 90s well, or
Early 2000s
early
as well.
2000s, yep. Just a
Yeah,
very classic intro.
yeah, just classic VeggieTales fun, singing the songs of VeggieTale. Um, it's very quotable. It's like I don't have any hands, like ah, that stuff. I will say
It's
it's
for the
something
kids.
that yeah, it's for the kids, you know. But the thing
Oh,
about the
okay, they
intro
better not laugh.
that I think that didn't really age well in terms of the years goes by is that sometimes they'll use footage from the show themselves, and whenever you use that, you're kind of weakening your intro a bit because it's not new. It's just footage.
Yeah, it's not particularly stylized, but I think it works well for what it's.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
it
for the kids.
it's for the kids, and you know it worked. It worked for what it's trying to do. So it's a still a classic intro that we still think of all the time now. So yeah,
Yeah. Our second honorable mention is also a pretty well known intro, and that is the intro for True Blood. Now, this is a show I haven't seen much of, so I can't really comment too much on that. But the way the intro sets the stage for what the show is about is very strong, and of course, you want a good intro to do that. Um, and just the use of sort of documentary footage interspersed with different visuals and yeah, just
disgusting imagery.
yeah, it sets a very particular tone. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not too fond of this intro. Uh, I think that the music is slightly slow. Uh, I don't know if the style of music really fits the thematic elements of vampires
well, it
and
is. It's vampires in New Orleans, so
okay, so you got the bayou to go on then.
yep,
Um, but yeah, there's a lot of imagery of things and people doing things in those imagery and whatnot that we shall not discuss. Overall, not too crazy about the intro.
I think it's a good intro for the type of show that this is, and yeah, I mean it's an iconic intro in itself, so I think it's worth mentioning for our list.
Moving on.
Okay, so the next intro we have is courtesy of Netflix for the show Sense8. This is also a intro that uses a lot of documentary footage to set the stage for the show. And this particular show, it is about 8 people who are psychically connected all around the world. So the intro is shots of various locations within the locations that they visit in the show. Um, and it does a very good job setting the stage for the kind of show you're watching, the sort of global awareness of the show. Um, and then it also, the music is kind of tense and gets your heart racing a little bit, which is great for the show.
Uh, Again, I don't really care for this intro. Listening to it, I think the music is very slow throughout it, which they're trying to set their mood. I don't think they fully achieved it for me. And then again, like these are things where I have to actually see the show to see how it fits itself. But for me, I don't really care too much about all this documentary footage and the music itself. So I wouldn't say it's a great intro.
I yeah, I think it is a very long intro. It's 2 minutes, which is a lot, especially when you're binging the show. So I've skipped this intro when I'm watching the show because it can be a bit much. But yeah, it's another great intro, I think.
Yeah, and so when we're talking about our intros here as well, I put a criteria of they have to be at least 30 seconds, and they're the type of intros that I don't feel the need to skip them.
Yep, I didn't quite have that same criteria, but yeah.
Right, so moving on from that.
Yeah. So next we have one of the introductions that kind of changed the world of TV show introductions, and it's the first that we're going to talk about from the company Elastic, who do a lot of TV show openings. They also do film credits and a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, and so when we take a look at the list here, there's a lot that's done by Elastic, and I think it's an appropriate name for the company because when I see those intros, I really feel like they feel kind of elasticy. I don't know.
Yeah. So this particular intro is the one for The Night Manager, which is a show about the arms trade and sort of the mixture of high society and war. So, of course, the introduction does that very well by having different high-class items slowly turn and transform into weapons. So, for example, missiles turn into bubbles in a champagne glass. A tea set turns into a gun. It's very clever and
Yeah,
sets the
it
stage
reminds
really
me
well.
a lot of a James Bond intro in the movies. Very fun and visual, and the music is actually a really nice touch in this one. It's makes me think of a spy thriller.
Yeah, it does a very good job setting the stage and is a bit of a game changer in that this was one of the first Elastic openings to make a big impression. So next up we have another Netflix show and I believe another Elastic intro. I do not remember if they made it. But this is the introduction for Narcos, the show about Pablo Escobar. And this one is, again, using some documentary footage and some actual footage of Pablo Escobar, but then they do cool things with the visuals where they're writing text over top of it and drawing maps and all of these different things. And then the song behind it is a song that's important to the show. So it really fits well with the show and gets you in the mood to watch it.
I mean, not for me. I think that the intro, I said this before, I think it does a good job at setting up the show itself. I think it tells us this is a show about Pablo Escobar and the drug trade. And I get that completely from watching the intro. But again, I feel like this intro is too slow. I'm not too flattered by the visuals themselves. And the song choice is, while it does fit the style that they're trying to go with, it's still not something that I'm too attracted to.
Yeah, I personally think it's a great intro, but again, it's one that I've skipped a few times, so that's why it's not on my official list, just in the honorable mentions.
Yeah. And so next on our honorable mentions, we have something that's a classic intro for people who like the DC movies and the DC universe itself. We have the Batman the Animated Series intro, which I think is a very fun animated piece that they have at the beginning of the episode. It just tells us this is about Batman, and it's fine. I personally think that while I do enjoy it, it has really cool animation and it looks cool. The problem I have with it is that it could sometimes get tedious when you're watching so many episodes back to back and you watch the same intro over and over again. You kind of get tired of watching it, and so sometimes I have to skip it, even though it is pretty to look at.
Yeah, I mean, it almost to me feels like a Batman short film, like
Yeah.
extremely short film. It tells its story very quickly with no dialogue, and yeah, I think you really understand what it does a great job helping you understand what the show is about without much need for exposition or anything.
Mm-hmm. So moving on from there.
Yeah, next up we have another Elastic intro for The Haunting of Hill House, which is a horror TV show, a very good TV show as well. And the introduction is sort of capturing these statues which are around the Hill House, and are actually an important background detail that they use very effectively throughout the show. Um, but you kind of, in the introduction, you see these statues crumbling, um, which has something to do with the themes of the show. And yeah, it's a tense introduction, and I think it does a great job setting up each episode of the show.
Yeah, I think that this is one of the better ones that I've seen here so far. I think I do enjoy it. I like the music choice in it. I do like the visuals. I think the only nitpick I have with it is that I feel that there's not enough in the intro. I kind of want there to be more visuals than just what we have here. More dynamic visuals than just a bunch of statues crumbling apart. Maybe different parts of the mansion or the house and whatnot. But besides that, it's fine. I could go with it.
Okay, next up we have another iconic introduction, and of course that is the introduction for Firefly.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, this is just a classic. I remember watching this show, almost binging it, I think, when I first saw it, and really liking the intro. It does a great job of just letting you know who's who and what's going on, and yeah, it's simple, but I think it works well, especially the
Yeah.
song.
Burn the land and boil the sea. You
Yep.
can't keep the sky from me. Yeah, for this one, I feel like this is an intro that is a product of its time, being the early 2000s, late 90s, I think.
Early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, personally, I don't think it's aged the best. I think that it's way too simple of an intro, just using a lot of footage from the show to create it. And it's kind of slow. I mean, you could like the song, but even still, it's for some reason I just find that the intro to be too slow for me.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, you really have to just be into this style.
Yeah. Well, next up we have an iconic one that I think we can both agree is excellent, but it's kind of an
I think,
obvious choice.
yeah, I think
Um,
most people will put this like at number one. I think.
yeah. And this is another Elastic opening, and this is the opening for Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
The iconic maps and
The music.
cities rising up and the music. Yeah, I mean it's great. It reminds me a lot of reading fantasy books when they have the map in the front, and I kept flipping back and forth to see the map. I think it works really well to show it at the beginning of each episode, especially in the earlier seasons where the distance between places really mattered. It's cool to just kind of see geographically each episode where the locations are. And yeah, the way that the cities kind of rise up in this very mechanical. Yeah, it's just really cool.
Yeah, and like this is just an intro that's just fun to watch. It's fun to see how the world is built. The music is really nice, and you can't skip it. It's just so much fun.
Yeah,
I mean, fun. Not. We'll get to fun later.
yeah, it's one that is very, like, I could watch, and each episode, well, not every single episode, but different episodes, since they visit different locations, will have different introductions, so it's fun to kind of watch and see all of the different locations.
Yeah, and so moving on from that.
Yep. Up next, we have another iconic introduction for Sherlock. Um, yeah, I mean, I think you have more to say on this than I do.
Yeah, it's a short and sweet intro, only 30 seconds long. It has a nice theme, and it does a good job at setting up, I think, the world of Sherlock. There's so many elements from the episodes that are to come, or even have been, that are just placed into this, and it's just really fun to see all these small elements come together, and it's nice.
Yeah, I think it's an effective introduction, and yeah, it kind of shows why this version of Sherlock Holmes is different from the others.
Yeah. Going on
Okay,
from that.
yeah. Next up, we have another introduction made by Elastic. I said they were going to be on this list a lot. Um, this is the introduction for Altered Carbon, which is a cyberpunk futuristic show. And there's just something about this introduction that's really cool. It's use of visuals, and it's a very neon drenched opening, which fits very well with the style that Elastic often uses. Sort of this heavily stylized CGI. And yeah, I think it's it's pleasant to watch.
Yeah. I don't really have a lot to say about this. There's some imagery, the lady, that I don't really care for. It's slow at times, but I don't really have much to say about this. It is probably something that you do need to see the show to really get the full feel for it.
Okay, next up we have Police Squad.
Police Squad. This is a TV show that came out in the 80s. And it's a comedic show. If you ever seen The Naked Gun, then this is pretty much what it is. The intro is comedic. There's a lot of just... We have... I don't know what that's about, but we have your police life with all these visual gags, and there's actually a different intro for each episode. So there's 6 episodes. And so, for each intro, a fun thing that they do is that they put the special guest for the episode at the intro, where they kill him off each episode at the beginning, and it's just fun. It's pure comedy. That's what this is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've never seen the show, but I think the introduction is pretty effective. It has the right amount of comedy, I think. It's not like so silly that you kind of lose interest.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just really effective in how it works, and kind of a bit over the top without completely going off the rails.
Yeah. And so, going on to the next one, we have another classic intro. And that's just the Star Trek intro from the original series. I like this for the music. I like the feel of the space adventure in this. And I think that this is a much better, superior intro than what we get in the Next Generations. Which Next Generations is a fun show, but it doesn't have the best intro and music choice for it. So I'd say this is the better choice.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Star Trek as you are. But yeah, I think this is an iconic theme that deserves mention.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up we have our actual lists. We've gotten through all of the honorable mentions.
Yeah, we have top 15 this time.
Yep. Since these are short and we don't always have much to say on them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, my number 15 introduction is What We Do in the Shadows, the FX TV show. Um, I mainly chose this one because the song choice is very appropriate for the show. It's kind of an upbeat, more comedic, um, and then the visuals of it are the three main vampires of the show kind of living throughout history, and you see paintings of them from way, way back, and then pictures of them from the 80s and 90s, and yeah, I think it hits the right tone and really sets up the show well, and it's only 30 seconds, so it does it very quickly.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say about this. It's an odd intro, especially the music choice and visuals. It's odd. I don't really have much to say about it.
Yeah, I think that describes the show, that it is odd.
Yeah. So moving on to my number 15. My number 15 is from a classic cartoon show called The Animaniacs. Basically, the characters are singing the theme song together, and it's basically explaining what they do, how the show works. Almost, it's just a bunch of skits, showing us all the characters and the fun, wacky tunes that they have, and it's really fun.
Yeah, I have never seen the show, but I think I got a good idea of what the show is about from the intro, which is always a good compliment for an introduction.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 14 is for Big Little Lies. Specifically, I think the first season I prefer that introduction. Um, and yeah, this is a more not relaxed show, but maybe less intense than some of the ones we've brought up so far. And the introduction just does a really great job getting you kind of mellowed down for the show, and then also showing off the California setting, um, very iconic highway through there, and it's mainly the main characters driving their kids to school, um, and then beach imagery and different parties, and yeah, just it fits well with the show and gives you a good idea of what you're in for.
Yeah, I don't really care for this intro. I think once again, I think one of the main problems I have with most intros is that they're too slow, and there's not much fun in them. So that's what I say.
Okay. I would
Which
disagree, but
I know you would, but moving on to my 14 is the intro for The Musketeers. I think that this one is really fun. It's upbeat. It's sweet. It's short. It has a lot of fancy, quick visuals that are artsy looking. It's cool. That's what I got out of it. It's just I get so excited from listening to the theme song. It's like, oh, this is cool. It's awesome. It's fun.
yeah, I think this is a good intro. The one thing I would say about it is that I think the stylization works well until they bring in the live action. Um,
True.
I would
Yeah.
have kind of wished that hasn't aged too well. I would have kind of wished that they would keep
It's a
it
very
silhouettes.
2014 intro.
Yeah, yeah, it kind of shows its age, but yeah, I mean it's fun.
Mm. Moving on.
Okay. Next up, we have Phineas and Ferb, a very iconic intro if you were growing up in the mid to late 2000s. Or even, I guess there were also stuff in the 2010s that they were making. Um, but yeah, this is, I mean, an iconic theme song. I've been able to sing every word of it for most of my life. Um, yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It sets up the premise of the show really well, sort of the wacky humor and um, yeah, it's there's a lot of great quotes from the song, and the only reason I don't have it up higher is that after a few episodes it starts to get a little repetitive.
Yeah.
And it is a little long, and since Phineas and Ferb is already a bit of a repetitive show, it can get a little bit too much sometimes. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
it works
It's an
well.
intro that, as I grew up, I kind of got tired from. So that's what I gotta say about that. Other than that, it's a fun, short and sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fun, sweet intro that shows a classic time period for those kids.
Yep.
Which we then move on to my number 13, and that is the 90s Flash intro. Um, the intro is not the greatest, but the reason why I enjoy it is because I love the music. The theme song is fantastic, and it's done by Danny Elfman, and you just really get a fun feel from the intro, even though it's very 90s. It's clearly 90s. It suffers from that, but besides that, it's fine.
Yeah. It definitely hasn't aged well, except for the song, which I think is pretty great.
Yeah.
It has that classic superhero theme feel to it.
Moving on.
Okay, next up we have a very, very iconic introduction, maybe more
Oh yeah,
iconic than almost anything else on this list.
probably the
Scooby
most
Doo, where
iconic
are
one.
you? Um, yeah, I mean, I watched this show as a kid. Um, I think this is a great introduction. It just has such a catchy song, and yeah, it feels too iconic not to mention. And even though it's not particularly stylized, it's just clips from the show. Um, but it hits that comedic tone with a dash of horror. Um, yeah, I think it just works really well.
Yeah, it's just a classic intro.
Yeah,
That's what I gotta
yeah,
say about that. That's the best way to describe it. It's a good old classic intro, which then leads to probably the second catchy part of my list. Is number 12 is the My Little Pony theme song from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Um, it's fine. It works for what it is. It's cute. It's it is what it is. It's it's catchy sometimes, and it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It gets the point of ponies and friendship across. It's fine. So there.
yeah. I mean, I had only seen the introduction when we watched through these for this video. I haven't seen the show, but I assume it works pretty well as an introduction to the show.
Half the
But yeah,
time.
personally,
Uh,
for my taste, it's a little cutesy, but
yeah. It
that's
does
just
get
me.
comedic at times because sometimes you get these cold openings that's like you have these main scary looking villains and you have your ponies in this life threatening situations. It's like, no, I will destroy you, and then it leads into My Little Pony. These this nice cheerful music that does not fit the tone sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, up next we have down for my number 11. I have Downton Abbey. Um, I guess it's a pretty well known intro in certain circles. And it's basically just imagery of this giant abbey house that the characters live in, and different people are cleaning and dusting and just doing various tasks. It's a very well shot introduction. It isn't particularly stylized, but it really fits well with the show. Um, and then, of course, you get the iconic view of the house with the upstairs downstairs dichotomy. Yeah, it does a really great job and always gets me in the mood to watch the show.
Yeah, it's a good intro. It does what it's supposed to do, set us in the world of the Downton Abbey, which is very posh
Yes.
for sure. Which leads to my number 11, which is Doctor Who, and there are so many intros for Doctor Who, roughly 10 minutes of intros, spanning over 50 years that have come from Doctor Who. And so it's really difficult to pick one. So I chose the one that I mainly grew up with, which was the 11th Doctor, um, from season 5. That intro is the one that I basically know. It's basically just the TARDIS going through the time vortex, and the same old, same old. But this one is fun. We got lightning, spicing it up.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a few episodes of Doctor Who. It definitely, the intro does a good job getting you in the mood for the sort of sci-fi. It has that feel in the music and in the visuals.
Yeah. Moving on.
Okay, so next up I have a series of unfortunate events, a more of a recent theme, and I think a very clever use of the theme song.
Yes.
It's kind of a reflection of the books. In the books, the author is constantly telling you, "Stop reading here; you'll just be more miserable." So, the introduction theme song, which is sung by Neil Patrick Harris, who plays the evil Count Olaf in the show, he's singing to look away, and all of these dreadful things will happen. And then each 2 episodes does a different book from the series. So the song describes whatever situation the characters are in, and then it switches every 2 episodes, so you get a decent variety as well.
Yeah, so this is something that you have to watch every episode because it's almost different every episode, and it's just a catchy song with a
Yeah,
really nice set of visuals. It's great. It's fun.
yeah. It's the visuals are a a board with all of the different pictures and newspaper clippings and maps, and yeah, it fits very well with the show. Um, yeah, and it's humorous and weird and a lot of fun.
Yeah, then going on to my number 10 is the Good Omens intro, which it has a good theme song, and that's good. But the thing that's really alluring about this one is that it has a very fun Monty Python vibe to it, where you just have these characters in different animation styles that are just weird, but it's whimsical and it's just so fun to watch. Granted that the CG is not the best thing, but it's stylized enough that it works for what they're trying to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it is very accurate to say it has a Monty Python vibe. I think the whole show does to a certain extent, but yeah, it's just a great intro to get you in the mood for every episode.
Yeah. And moving on from there.
Okay, so for my number 9, we're already in our top 10. I have the iconic introduction for BoJack Horseman, which follows BoJack Horseman day in the life, always on his face, which is kind of an interesting way to do it. So you always kind of see his expressions as crazy stuff is happening behind him. It's different in
And the
different
crazy
seasons.
things, yeah, the crazy things change throughout the show
Yeah,
as things happen in the character's life.
and the theme song is it just fits the show so well and
It's
sets
jazzy.
the mood.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty nifty and
Yeah,
jazzy. It's fun to listen to.
and of course it does a great job showing off Bojack's house, which is a very important location in the show.
Yeah. And then moving on to my number 9, we have the Walking Dead intro, which I think does a good job at setting the vibe of the world, where it's like you're in a world full of post-apocalyptic zombies, and it just really gives you the feel of abandonment in the world, creepiness. It has a nice set of songs, interesting visuals, and it gets you in the mood for some creepy things to go on.
Yeah, it has a good horror feel to it. That definitely fits with the zombie apocalypse. The coloring that they did over the footage um, really gives it that extra flavor.
Yeah, and as the show goes on, the intro, the visuals gets slightly darker and more rotten. It is the best way to put it. As flesh rots, so does the intro. It gets blacker and blacker.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's effective. I've never seen the show, but it definitely gets me to want to watch the show.
Moving
Okay,
on from there.
next up for my number 8, I have the intro for Jessica Jones. Um, this is just the stylization in this one. It's supposed to look like it's been painted um, with these very long brush strokes, and it just looks really cool. And
Like
then the
watercolor.
yeah, and then the actual visuals and the theme song have a great noir vibe, which fits the show very well.
Yeah,
Um,
every time I look at this, I just feel like I'm looking at the cover of the Great Gatsby book.
yeah,
Just very colorful, very strange, and it's one of those intros that because they play it at the beginning of the episode. Every time I click on the next episode, it just gets to automatically get skipped, and it's just like, man, I just want to watch the intro.
yeah,
Stop skipping it.
yeah. It is. I will confess that multiple times when I was watching binging the show on Netflix, I would intentionally click back at the start of the episode when I clicked on the next episode so I could watch the intro again.
Right, yeah. So moving on to the next one, my number 8, I have the Batman the Brave and the Bold intro. This is a very fun and exciting intro for me. It's very jazzy. It gets you pumped up. Uh, it really sets you in the mood for the style of Batman they're trying to go with, and I just love it. I just can never skip it because it's just so fun and jazzy to listen to. It's yeah. I just thinking about it just gets me happy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different kind of Batman than is more prevalent today. It's much lighter and yeah, I think it's an exciting introduction.
Yeah.
Okay. For my number 7, I have the opening for Shameless, which is not a stylized introduction, but instead it is a day in the life of the Gallagher family bathroom, um, doing different short sequences as different people move in and out. And it starts with the main character of the show, Fiona, dragging her drunk, passed out father out of the bathroom, which very much sets the tone for both of those characters. There's different little details for each different character. The youngest kid sticks his toothbrush in the toilet to clean it off. It it fits that kind of impoverished yet familial vibe of the show.
It's a strange one, that's for sure. I don't really know what to say about it. Hmm, it's got some interesting imagery in it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think it works very well with the type of show that Shameless is. It's a more comedic introduction. Um, and yeah, it introduces each of the main characters and kind of their personalities a little bit. Um, and then in different seasons, they do change it up a bit. And I still prefer the original opening, though.
All right. So moving on to my number 7, I have the 1960s Batman intro. It's probably one of the most classic intros for Batman. Just like na 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 Batman, like everyone knows that almost. You don't even have to watch the show or even seen this intro. It's just like a given for unknowing Batman. You just know na 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 Batman. It's fun. It's catchy. It's enjoyable. It's not aged well in terms of the graphics, but it's still fun to watch.
Yeah, it feels a lot like an older comic book with the bold colors and the different speech bubbles for the actions, and yeah, it hits that right tone.
Moving on.
Okay, so next up, for my number 6, I have the opening for Gravity Falls.
Hmm.
Um, Another great animated TV show and another great animated introduction. Um, I think this one, there's a lot of humor in it, but there's also a certain edge to it. It shows off a lot of the locations in Gravity Falls, especially the Mystery Shack. You get all of the different characters' personalities as well. Um, and yeah, it's just really great. And then the song itself has that like mysterious, a little bit dangerous, but still
Yeah,
fun.
it's a fun intro. I think the only downside, specifically for me when listening to it, I don't particularly care for the instrument that they use to do the song because it starts to just ring in your head sometimes if you're sensitive to that type of thing. But besides that, it's a fine intro. And moving on to my number 6, I have probably one of the more newer intros in this list, and that is from Doom Patrol. Um, I think the visuals are fine, but I think what really sells this intro for me specifically is just the music. I think the music just works for me. I enjoy it. I like the music in this one, and it works with its visuals sometimes. Um, it doesn't exactly set you in the mood for the show, but it's still a fun thing to look at every time.
Yeah, this is another intro by Elastic. Not the last time they will be on this list. But yeah, I think the visuals are really cool. I think the song is good. My one complaint is I don't think it fits the vibe of the show particularly well, which is why I didn't put it on my list,
Only
even though I love the show.
yeah, only some segments would I say that it fits it.
Yeah, but yeah, it's the visuals are very strong, and yeah, the music is very good. But again, I think it doesn't quite fit the show as well as some of the other introductions we've talked about.
Yeah. Moving on.
Okay, next up we have the intro for my number 5. Now we're in our top 5. I have the intros for American Horror Story, the iconic horror series. And each season is a different story. So each season, except for one of the seasons, unfortunately, they each get their own introductions with different visuals, and it's the same song, but the style of it is changed to fit the theme of the show. So you have a for the circus season, you have a more circusy theme, and then for the 1980s season, you have a much more 1980s, almost VHS type introduction. And then each season also has its own visuals. Sometimes it's just creepy visuals that you would expect. Sometimes it's stop motion animation or really stylized. Yeah, I think it works. It's a lot of fun each season to see what the introduction will be. Um, Unfortunately, there is one season that doesn't have an introduction. Um, but yeah, it's just a really cool way to get in the mood for the show and for each specific season.
Yeah, I think the 1980s one is a really fun one. Really gets you to that style of just old, those old slasher films. Definitely, they have their own
Yeah,
style.
and it is. I think it's almost worth watching all of them just to see the differences that happen. But yeah, it's cool how they're able to take the same song and the same ideas and change them up for each introduction.
Yeah. On to my number five. This is one of my from my childhood. Um, and it's the Spectacular Spider-Man intro. I really love it. I love the song. This is an intro that's definitely a product of its time from the early 2000s. It really feels like the early 2000s, especially with the song choice, but I love it. Like, I get excited every time I listen to that. I can never skip the intro. It's something that I grew with, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about the introduction. I haven't seen the show, so but yeah, it seems to fit that the vibe the show is going for. Okay, my number 4 is from the unfortunately not particularly well known 2016 TV show Brain Dead, which is a sort of a political comedy where a bunch of aliens show up and start eating people's brains and taking control of the government, and it's about sort of partisanship and how divisive politics can be. This is specifically from a 2016 perspective. Um, so before the previous election, but it's just a lot of fun, the show itself. And then the introduction, they do a really smart thing where a lot of shows have introductions and a lot of shows have previously on segments. So this particular show fuses the two, and they had a singer come in and he sings the previously on, um, and it's just kind of upbeat and funny, and it does a really good job setting up the show and also letting you know what happened last time.
Right? Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting intro. One of the unique ones for this take. My number four, is another classic for DC fans, and that is of course the Justice League intro. Very iconic. I love it. It's just about our main seven characters just walking and just showing off in these beautiful looking sunset, and it's they show off our each characters what they're like, and this intro just really feels like a superhero. Just intro, and it's good. I love it. It's visually interesting. The CGI may not have aged the best, but it's very stylized in a way that it doesn't really matter. It's good still.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is neat that they were able to stylize it to a point that um, it almost doesn't matter that the CGI hasn't aged the best. Um, yeah, I think it works well. I haven't seen the show, but the introduction was definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, my number three is a very recent one from the recent miniseries Mrs. America. And this is another more stylized introduction. It's a disco version of a classic song, which I am forgetting exactly what it was.
Beethoven's
Yes,
Ninth.
yes, Beethoven's Ninth. Over top of these visuals, which are sort of stylizing the fight for the Equal Rights Amendment and against the Equal Rights Amendment, which is what the show is about. And it does a very good job. The imagery and how it moves from one to another, it just works really well. And I remember watching the first episode and seeing this. I knew I was going to love the show, and it stands on its own is how good I think it is.
Yeah, the intro looks very fun looking. It has a nice style to it, which I think works for it, and it just puts you in the right time period.
Yeah.
Moving on to my number three is again, it's another intro from the early 2000s, and you can clearly tell it's from the early 2000s. And that is the 2003 Ninja Turtles intro. Um, I love it. It gets me pumped every time I watch this. Like, all it's about is like counting down our four turtles, telling us who they are about, but it just so fast and pumping. That's just I get so excited from watching it. Just and I just can never skip it because it's so fun. Even though it's not aged the best in our modern standards.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about this because I've never watched the show, but it seems to be a good representation of the tone of the show.
And moving on.
Yeah, so my number two introduction is um, another introduction made by Elastic and another introduction which I think stands on its own, separate from the show, while also complementing the show really well, and that is for the TV show American Gods, which is it's a very interesting show based on a Neil Gaiman book, which is about if gods were real and a bunch of them came to America along with immigrants, but then you have these newer gods like the god of the internet or different things like that. So you have this conflict between the two, and the introduction takes that and uses a lot of fusing religious imagery with technological imagery. So a menorah has a bunch of different plugs on the top of it, or the Virgin Mary is wearing a cloth that is computer parts. It's clever and makes a point while also complementing the point that the show is making.
Yeah, I'm not too fond of this intro. It's weird. It's it's interesting. It's visually interesting. That's just how I'm gonna put it. I don't really get much from the intro.
I think it's definitely worth checking out, and it is one of the best intros that Elastic has done. Also, the music fits very well. It hits a sort of it has newer elements alongside sort of more classical elements. That really it fits with the visuals as well.
Yeah. Moving on to my number two. It is the Teen Titans intro. I think this does a good job at stylizing the world of Teen Titans, and it does a good job at telling us who it is, who these characters are. The song is it's interesting. It's basically this Japanese band that they brought in to do this American kid show, which is a weird thing to do, but it works. It's an iconic theme song for Teen Titans and these characters. And the thing about this intro is that there's actually two versions of the intro. There's an English version and a Japanese version. And the reason why they have two versions is that whenever we reach filler episodes, they'll play they play the Japanese intro, which also signifies that it's a much more wacky intro. And I think that the lyrics for the intro are actually wacky as well because they don't actually go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add. It reminds me a lot of anime openings, but yeah.
Now on to our number ones.
Okay, so my number one is another introduction made by Elastic, and I think the best one that they've made, and that is the introduction for Westworld, specifically season 3. It has a lot of strong visuals, a lot of sort of political imagery. Essentially, it's machines assembling robots and different things along with that. But it also has some very good references to sort of some of the material that inspired the show. Specifically, it has some clear references to Ghost in the Shell, which is a movie that I am a very big fan of. But yeah, it just does a great job displaying the show's transition from this theme park that's Western inspired to the future world that season 3 takes place in. And the visuals are they're almost completely black and white with like a blue tint until the very end where you get just this bright red, which really stands out.
Yeah, the music choice is probably what I think is the better part of this intro. It's weird. It's weird. I don't really know. I have to see the show to actually understand what it's about, but it's interesting. It's interesting, that's for sure. I don't really know what else to say about that. But it's interesting. Well, then leads to my number one, which is, I believe, another Elastic one, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and that is the opening to Daredevil. I've always loved this one, and for me, I think this is probably my favorite intro, which it's my number one, and it's simple. It's just blood going down and forming the city, forming the different buildings, the different statues, the different streets and bridges, with a nice theme song music with piano and the beat of a heartbeat. That's really nice, and you get the feel for what this city is. And you just it's Daredevil. You almost see it as if he sees it, and it's interesting. And I love it. It's almost perfectly done.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool how they use a single color through the whole introduction. I think it makes it more effective, that sort of deep red, and then different shades of that. And yeah, it definitely feels like an Elastic introduction. It has that very specific stylized CGI feel.
Yeah. It's well done. I always love it every time I see the intro. And so yeah, that is our list for today. It's a lot of intros to go through, and there's still a whole lot more that we could mention, but there's so many, and there's a lot of bad intros out there, but what are we gonna do?
Yeah, it is interesting how TV introductions have gotten so much better, even over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Game of Thrones was a big reason for that, and of course Elastic, who made that introduction and has been making TV introductions ever since. Yeah, it's worth checking out their work, not just the ones we mentioned, but everything they've done is incredible.
Yeah. So, Matthew, you got any final closing thoughts here for us today?
Yeah, I think a bad introduction never ruins a show, but a good introduction always makes me more excited to watch.
Yeah, that's very true. And so that's why you should always get a good intro, people. You know, that's the lesson we learned today. Get a good intro, you get something that's lasting for ages. If you don't have an intro, you're not gonna get that much memory out of it. CW. Yeah, that's what I gotta say today. So yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.